Hello, students. I am Dr. Shota Gogia. I'm going to talk about our today's topic. Let's begin. First, we need to understand the role of anatomy in the study of medicine. Anatomy is a basic subject on which all knowledge must be built. Anatomy provides basic knowledge about the human body. It helps in clearing the fundamental concept as to how our bodies function. Anatomy is the identification and description of the structures of living things. It's a branch of biology and medicine, and the study of anatomy dates back more than 2,000 years trusted source to the ancient Greeks. Human anatomy is the study of structures of the human body, and understanding of anatomy is the key to practice of medicine and other areas of health. The word anatomy comes from Greek words ana meaning up and tom meaning a cutting. Traditionally, studies of anatomy have involved cutting up or dissecting organisms. Now, however, imaging technology can show us much about how the inside of a body works. Anatomy includes those structures that can be seen grossly and microscopically. Typically, when used by itself, the term anatomy tends to mean gross or microscopic anatomy. Gross or microscopic anatomy, that is the study of structures that can be seen without using a microscopic. Microscopic anatomy, also called histology, is the study of cells and tissues using a microscope. Let's talk about important anatomical terms. Start from the anatomical position. Anatomical position or standard anatomical position refers to the specific body orientation used when describing an individual's anatomy. The body is in the anatomical position when standing upright with feet together, hands by side, and face looking forward. The mouth is closed and the facial expression is natural. The rim of bone under the eyes is in the same horizontal plane as the top of the opening to the air, and the eyes are open and focused on something in the distance. The palms of the hand face forward with the fingers right and together and with the pad of the thumb turned 90 degrees to the pads of the fingers. The toes point forward also. Let's talk about anatomical planes. The three planes of body are sagittal plane, the coronal plane, and the transverse plane. These planes are imaginary reference points that divide the body into various sections in order to help describe relatively anatomy. The sagittal plane is a vertical plane that travels down the middle of the human body and divides the body into right and left portions. Then a plane that passes through the central of the body, divide it into equal right and left, helps is termed the medial sagittal plane. Also, we have this term in the anatomy. Let's talk about the coronal plane, which one runs vertically through the side of the body, dividing it into the front of the body and the back of the body. The transverse plane runs horizontally, separating the top half of the body from the bottom half. We call them superior and inferior parts. Directional terms provide precise descriptions of a structure's location. They allow a description of anatomical position by comparing location relative to other structures or within the rest of the body. Standard anatomical terms for direction include superior and inferior, anterior and posterior, dorsal and ventral, lateral and medial, deep and superficial, proximal and distal and dorsal. Let's begin with superior and inferior. Superior and inferior are used when referring to part of the body which are towards an end of the body. Superior structures are towards the head, while inferior structures are towards the feet. Examples include the superior and inferior vena cava, which carry the oxygenated blood away from the head and from the lower body. From the head, it's superior, and from the lower body, it's inferior to the head. Anterior and posterior are sometimes used in place of superior and inferior, respectively. Anterior refers to the side of the structure facing up in the standard anatomical position, while posterior refers to the bottom side. For example, the pituitary gland has an anterior and posterior side, each of which secretes different types of hormones. Dorsal and ventral are sometimes used in place of anterior and posterior, respectively. Dorsal means the back side or upper side, while ventral means the frontal or lower side. Also, we have lateral and medial. Lateral is used to describe anything closer to the side of the body, while medial is used to describe anything towards the middle of the body. Deep refers to the structures closer to the inferior center of the body, and superficial is used to describe structures that are closer to the exterior surface of the body. For example, bones in an appendage are located deeper than the muscles. But, for example, the outer layers of skin are superficial to deeper layers of skin. Proximal and distal describe one point relative to another. Proximal refers to a point closer to reference point, while distal refers to a point farther away. When describing appendage, the proximal end of the appendage connects to the appendage to the body, while the distal end is away from the body. And also we have here rostral. Rostral is used particularly in the head to describe the position of structures which refers to the nose. For example, the forebrain is rostral to the hindbrain. What is human body structure? The human body is a single structure, but it's made up of billions of smaller structures of four major kinds: cells, tissues, organs, and systems. An organ is an organization of several different kinds of tissues, so arranged that together they can perform a special function. I think you have enough basic information about cells, so let's move on. Talk about tissues. Tissues are groups of cells that are similar in structure and functions. There are four primary tissues: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nerve tissues. All perform different body functions. Those are different cells. Epithelial tissues are widespread throughout the body. They form the covering of all body surface, line body cavities, and hollow organs, and are the major tissues and glands. They perform a variety of functions that include protection, secretion, absorption, filtration, and sensory reception. Also, the cell is epithelial tissue are tightly packed together with very little intercellular matrix because the tissue form covering and lining the cells have one free surface that is not contact with other cells. Opposite the free surface, the cells are attached to underlying connective tissue by a non-cellular basement membrane. This membrane is a mixture of carbohydrates and proteins secreted by the epithelial and connective tissue cells. Epithelial cells may be squamous, cuboidal, or columnar in shape, and may be arranged in single or multiple layers. Let's move to, we have here connective tissue. This connective tissue binds structures together for a framework and support for organs. and the body as wall, store fat, transport substance, protect against disease, and help repair tissue damage. They occur throughout the body. Connective tissue are characterized by an abundance of intercellular matrix with relatively few cells. Numerous cell types are found in this connective tissue. They are of the three of the most common are the fibroblast, macrophage, and mast cells. The types of connective tissue include loose, these connecting tissues, dense fibrous connective tissue, elastic connective tissue, cartilage, bones, also osseous tissue, and blood. Let's talk about muscle tissue. Muscle tissue is composed of cells that have the special ability to shorten or contract in order to produce movement of the body parts. The tissue is highly cellular and is well supplied with blood vessels. The cells are long and slender, so they are sometimes called muscle fibers, and these are usually arranged in bundles or layers that are surrounded by connective. Actin and myosin are contractile proteins in this muscle tissue. Muscle tissue can be categorized into skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle tissues. And then last one, this is nervous tissue. It's found in the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. It's responsible for coordinating and controlling many body activities. It simulates muscle contraction, creates an awareness of this environment, and plays a major role in emotion, memory, and reasoning. To do all these things, the cells in the nervous tissue needs to be able to communicate with each other by way of electrical nerve impulses. The cell in nervous tissues that generate and conduct impulses are called neurons or nerve cells. These cells have three principal parts: the dendrites, the cell body, and the axon. The main part of the cell, the part that carries on the general function, is a cell body. A group of tissues that work together to perform closely relative functions. There are 11 organ systems in the human body: integumentary system, skeletal system, muscle system, nervous system, endocrine system, also cardiovascular, this is circulatory system. Lymphatic and immune system are together in this group. Respiratory system, digestive system, urinary system, and reproductive system here. To study the chemical level of organization, scientists consider the simplest building block of matter, subatomic particles, atoms, and molecules. All matter in the universe is composed of one or more unique substance called elements. Examples of these elements are hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, is calcium, and iron. The smallest unit of any of these pure substance elements is an atom. These atoms are made up of the subatomic particles such as the proton, electron, and neutron. Two or more atoms combine to form the molecules, such as the water molecules, proteins, and the sugars found in the living things. Molecules are the chemical building blocks of all body structures. A cell is smallest independently function unit of a living organism. Single celled organisms like bacteria are extremely small. It's independently living organism with a cellular structure. The human cell typically consists of flexible membranes that enclose cytoplasm, a water-based cellular fluid with a variety of tiny functions units called organelles. In humans, as in all organisms, a cell performs all functions of life. A tissue is a group of many similar cells that work together to perform a specific function. An organ is an anatomically distinct structures of the body composed of two or more tissue types. Each organ performs one or more specific physiological functions. An organ system is a group of organs that work together to perform major functions or meet physiological needs of this body, and the organism level is the highest level of organization. An organism is a living being that has cellular structures and that can independently perform all physiological functions necessary for life. In multicellular organisms, including humans, all cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems of the body work together to maintain the life and health of these organs. Let's move to the skeletal system. The skeletal system is comprised mainly of bones, around 206 of them in an adult to be specific, but there are also a good amount of cartilage, joints, and ligaments, which all together make up around 20% of personal body mass. Cartilage is a vascular form of connective tissue consisting of extracellular fibers embedded in a matrix that contains cells localized in small cavities. The amount and kind of extracellular fibers in the matrix varies depending on the type of cartilage. The functions of cartilage are to support for tissues, provide a smooth gliding the surface for bone articulation at joints, and enable the development and grows the long bones. There are three types of cartilage: hyaline, elastic, and fibrocartilage. So fibrous cartilage, we call them. Hyaline cartilage is most common. Matrix contains a moderate amount of cartilage fibers. Elastic is this matrix. Elastic cartilage. This matrix contains collagen fibers, along with a large number of elastic fibers, and this fibrocartilage matrix contains a limited number of cells and ground substances and emits a substance amount of collagen fibers. The skeleton can be divided into two subgroups: the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton consists of the bones of the skull, cranium also we call it, vertebral column, ribs, and sternum, whereas the appendicular skeleton consists of the bones of the upper and lower limbs. Bones are more than just the scaffolding that holds the body together. It's a calcified living connective tissue that forms the majority of skeleton. Bones come in all shapes and sizes and have many roles. Bones are living, active tissues that are constantly being remodeled. Bones have many functions. They support the body structurally, protect our vital organs, and allow us to move. Also, they provide an environment for bone marrow, where the blood cells are created, and they act as a storage for minerals, particularly calcium. At birth, we have around 2070 soft bones. As we grow, some of these fuse. Once we reach adulthood, we have 206 bones. The largest bone in the human body is the thigh bone or femur, and the smallest is stepped in the middle ear, which are just 3 millimeters long. The bone have an internal structure similar to a honeycomb, which makes them rigid yet relatively light. Bone is not uniformly solid, but consists of a flexible matrix about 30% and bound minerals about 70%, which are intricately woven and indelibly remodeled by a group of specialist bone cells. Their unique composition and design allows bones to be relatively hard and strong, while remaining lightweight. Bone matrix is 95% composed of elastic collagen fibers, also known as ossein, and the remains is a ground substance. The elasticity of collagen improves fracture resistance. The matrix is hardened by the binding of an inorganic mineral salt, calcium phosphate, in a chemical arrangement known as calcium hydroxide pelletized. It's a bone mineralization that gives bones rigidity. Bone is actively considered and remodeled throughout life by special bone cells known as osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Within any single bone, the tissue is woven into two main patterns known as cortical and calcaneus bone, and each with different appearance and characteristics. The mechanical properties of bone are fundamental to the ability of our skeleton to support movement and to provide protection to our vital organs, such as deterioration in mechanical behavior with aging, and disease such as osteoporosis and diabetes can have profound consequences for individual quality of life. The bones of the human body come in a variety of size and shapes. The five types of the bones are long, short, flat, irregular, and sesamoid bones. Begin with these long bones that are longer than they are wide are called long bones. They consist of a long shaft with two bulky ends or extremities. They are primarily compact bone but may have a large amount of spongy bone, and at the end of extremities, long bones include bones of the thigh, leg, arm, and forearm. You can find in our picture which bone we have here. And this long bones categorized. So also we have here short bones. Short bones are roughly cube shaped with vertical and horizontal dimensions approximately equal. They consist primarily of spongy bone, which is covered by a thin layer of compact bone. Short bone includes the bones of the wrist and ankle. Look at this picture. We have here scapholding, lunate, tuberculum, and other bones. Also, we have here flat bones. Flat bones are thin, flattened, and usually curved. Most of the bones of the cranium are flat bones. We have here irregular bones. Also, bones are not in any of the above three categories are classified as irregular bones. They are primarily sponge bones that is covered within the thin layer of compact bone. The vertebra and some of the bones in the skull are irregular bones. All bones have surface markings and characteristics that make a specific bone unique. There are holes, depressions, small surfaces, lines, projection, and other markings. This usually represents passageways for vessels and nerves, points of articulation with other bones, or points of attachment for tendons and ligaments. And the last one we have here, sesamoid bones. Sesamoid bones are a small round bones that is embedded with a tendon, or whose purpose is to reinforce and decrease the stress on the tendon. We will mostly find sesamoid bone is a knee, thumb, and big toe. Others in the head and feet are much smaller. The term osteogenesis and ossification are often used synonymously to indicate the process of bone formation. Parts of skeleton form during the first few weeks after conception. By the end of the 8th week after conception, the skeletal pattern is formed in the cartilage and connective tissue membranes, and ossification begins. Bone development continues throughout adulthood. Even after adult stature is attained, bone development continues for repair of fractures and for remodeling to meet changing lifestyles. Osteoblasts, osteocytes, and osteoclasts are the three cell types involved in the development, growth, and remodeling of bones. Osteoblasts are bone-forming cells, osteocytes are mature bone cells, and osteoclasts break down and reabsorb bone. There are types of ossifications. I'll begin with intramembranous ossification. It involves the replacement of sheet-like connective tissue membrane with bony tissue. Bones formed in the manner are called intramembranous bones. They include certain flat bones of the skull and some of the irregular bones. The future bones are first formed as connective tissue membranes. Osteoblasts migrate to the membrane and deposit bony matrix around themselves. When the osteoblasts are surrounded by matrix, they are called osteocytes. And we have here endochondral ossification also. It involves the replacement of hyaline cartilage with bony tissue. Most of the bones of the skeleton are formed in this manner. These bones are called endochondral bones. In this process, the future bones are first formed as hyaline cartilage models. During the third month after conception, the perichondrium that surrounds the hyaline cartilage models becomes infiltrated with blood vessels and osteoblasts and change into a periosteum. The osteoblasts form a collar of compact bone around the diaphysis. At the same time, the cartilage in the center of diaphysis begins to disintegrate. Osteoblasts penetrate the disintegrated cartilage and replace it with spongy bone. This forms a primary ossification center. Ossification continues from the center toward the end of the bones. After spongy bone is formed in the diaphysis, osteocytes break down the newly formed bone to open up the medullary cavity. Bones grow in the length at the epiphyseal plate by a process that is similar to endochondral ossification. The cartilage is a region of the epiphyseal plate next to the epiphyse continues to grow by mitosis. The chondrocytes in the region next to the diaphysis age and degenerate. Osteoclasts move in and ossify the matrix to form bone. This process continues throughout childhood and adolescence years until the cartilage grows, slows, and finally stops. When cartilage growth cases, usually in the early 20s, the epiphyseal plate completely ossifies so that only a thin epiphyseal line remains and the bones can no longer grow in length. Bone growth is under the influence of growth hormone from the anterior pituitary gland and sex hormones from the ovaries and testes. Even though bones stop growing in length in early adulthood, they can continue to increase in thickness or diameter throughout life in response to stress from increased muscle activity or to weight. The increase in diameter is called a positional growth. Osteoblasts in the periosteum form compact bone around the external bone surface. At the same time, osteoclasts in the endosteum break down bone on the internal bone surface around the medullary cavity. These two processes together increase the diameter of the bone and at the same time keep the bone from becoming excessively heavy and bulky. Thank you for attention.